how you feel you look can often impact your confidence.
That is so true. And actually, many people can find that the self-esteem is negatively impacted by unsightly and sometimes itchy and painful varicose veins and thread veins.
And that's why we're actually so pleased to share that this episode is being sponsored by veincenter.com. And they're able to help those listeners who find that they have to hide their legs through summer months or even have to cover their facial thread veins with makeup.
If that's you, just take a look at veincenter.com.
Some people dread having to go to school. Some people dread having to go to work. My dread was going home. It's amazing, isn't it, how your environment, and particularly when it's a toxic environment, it can have such an impact on how you feel, and it can have an impact on your happiness. And I think that this is something that probably a lot of us can kind of allude to or have had some experience with. And today we've got a lovely guest, Nicola. Hi, Nicola. Who's going to come with us to talk to us about toxic environments and happiness generally. Because what we want to do really is we're looking for this, we're creating this metaphorical Handbook to Happiness book. So we're kind of looking at dissecting and trying to make everybody's world a better place, because I think that we all go through these things in life and quite often feel that it's just me. But the truth is that nobody is immune to sadness and things going wrong, and none of us are immune to being infected by somebody else's toxicity.
And I suppose the path of least resistance is the easiest thing to do, always. And it's always easy to do nothing, isn't it? Because you just think, well, this is going to get better, or, you just accept things.
I think it's fear of change as well, isn't it? Don't you think? That we tolerate things because we fear the unknown. What if I'll stay in this relationship, I'll stay in this job, I'll stay in this house, because the unknown is scary.
Absolutely. And I think it feels bad, and it feels bad, but you always think, well, what if the alternative is worse? And we have no reference for what the alternative would be. And I watched a really, really interesting TikTok actually a few days ago. There was a lady basically saying that, whenever you're in that situation where you don't know what to do, you should just really make a quick decision, obviously with logic, but you should make a quick decision, which seems like, you should overthink these things, but actually we can never predict the alternative. So, even if we go into a situation and actually we end up with a bad outcome, we don't know that what we would have had wouldn't have been worse. We never get the option of the alternative.
I love that.
But we always make the decision based on what we know or what we think will be the best.
Yeah.
But we don't know. The way that we gain experience is by making bad mistakes. If you think about it, all our experience comes from things that have gone wrong. And that's how we learn. If something goes right, we don't learn anything from it because we don't know how we did it.
And invariably, when we ruminate, then we tend to just end up standing still because we catastrophize. We don't think, well, how great it's going to be. Quite often, it's kind of, because I think we naturally risk assess as human beings. So we're risk assessing every situation. And in order to be able to risk assess, we have to think of the worst, don't we? So, and I'm sure that Nicola, I'm sure, obviously you're here today because I think that you've had your fair share of toxic environments and probably staying in, like we're saying, is staying
I'm
in
excited
too long.
to hear Nicola's story because
I
I
think it's
understand
quite
that
relatable to a lot of people listening that will really resonate with what she's saying.
Yeah, because I think it's almost in some respects the lesser of two evils. So I've had a long career in a huge national organisation for 20 years, and there have been real periods of where I've experienced that toxicity, bullying, if you will, and I've stayed. And I've stayed because at one point I had young children. And then actually in the end, I actually couldn't even understand the reason I was staying. I was just still there, turning up every day.
Do you find that, you said, I had young children. Don't you find that, and I think we all do this, we sort of make excuses to justify staying.
Massively. And it was always for me, well, I'm providing a really good future for my children. So therefore I must accept this behaviour that's being displayed towards me and be okay with that. When really it was actually soul destroying. And in some respects, you know, there were times when I was just like a shell of a person. And my husband would say to me, you know, where have you gone? Where are you? And I didn't recognise myself, and people would say to me, are you okay? And I burst into tears in the corridor in work, and I'd think, what am I doing here? It's got to be something else. But I couldn't see what that was at the time. It was only probably about 6 months ago that I started to think, actually, I'm going to carve a plan out here to make a better future.
After how long?
20-year career, but 6 months after maybe a period of about 18 months where I was really, truly unhappy. And I kept trying to find ways to make myself happy. And people say, you know, it's a job. You leave it at the door. You don't leave it at the door. You take it home with you, and then you find it impacts your ability to be, or for me, to be a good mum, a good wife, a good friend, just a good person in general, because I felt so angry all the time. I was carrying this anger around and I couldn't let it go.
So basically you had 18 months of having hit the threshold, and then it took 18 months for you to make this decision. But can you just take me back, when did it first start? When did you first think, I don't like this?
I first started experiencing that sort of behaviour when I started climbing the ladder in this organisation. So I started, 20 years ago as a secretary, and then I slowly sort of climbed my way up through the ladder. And I was really proud of myself, and so were my family. But then you start to mix with different people at different levels. And then sort of you jealousy, and I didn't see it as jealousy at the time. Couldn't understand why people were being, I thought they were just being, why are they being like that round a board table or a meeting? Yeah. I couldn't understand it. And so I beat myself up. Was I not a good person? Could I do more in work? Was I helpful enough? What was it that I was doing? Never really understood that actually.
So you were consistently trying to compensate.
Exactly. So I would work longer hours. I would be on my phone answering emails at 9:00 at night, trying to always do more, but it was never good enough. And, there were some times when, and it was bullying, I didn't see that at the time. And that was probably about 15 years ago. And my children were all really small. So I was juggling children in nursery and all these other pressures. And so I just took it. Yeah. And then just found another job and moved into another part of that organisation.
But again, the other pressures are the fact that, you're running a house and you're looking after a family, and it's like, well, if I leave this, how are we going to cope?
Exactly.
And did you... Sorry, go on.
I was saying, so you obviously felt pressure from loads of different angles.
Yeah.
But
absolutely.
my question, I think this again, this is something that I think a lot of people feel, is that you, Nicola, you sort of said, I started off as a secretary, so I started sort of at the bottom of the ladder almost. Yeah. And then you started to climb. Now, in that climb, what we found, particularly with people that we work with in our clinic, is that these people that climb, they actually have a bit of imposter syndrome. So because what actually happens is you hold yourself emotionally and mentally
still at that secretary level.
At that secretary level, and then suddenly you feel that you're hanging around people that have got more experience than you, that are more intelligent than you, that are better than you. And you feel like this imposter and like, I'm going to get found out. And therefore, as you quite rightly say, then what happens is you go, it's me. Yeah. So I need to work harder. I need to do more hours. I need to go above and beyond. And all at the detriment of you, your life, your happiness, your emotion. And on top of that, you kind of lose sight of the fact that they didn't promote you because they thought you were nice. They promoted you because you deserved the role.
You don't tell yourself those things. No. That's the issue. And I remember having some coaching, and he said exactly the same thing to me about imposter syndrome. And I gave an example. This happened to me once, and I'd recently had quite a big promotion, and I walked into a boardroom, and I was actually going to chair the meeting. And somebody said to me, are you the girl that's here to take the notes? And so they were the types of comments that would, and then people would say, or I remember starting at a new organisation and somebody saying, oh, are you the one that's got 4 children? Because I looked young, they couldn't understand why I might have had 4 children. It was those types of comments that would and they would sit and they would nestle in my head. Yeah. And then I would play them back. Not the positive things that were said, it was always the negative things. But when things like that did happen, like, are you here to take the notes? That would always make me think, well, I'll show you. Yeah. So I'd always do more.
Good. So you used it to your advantage in that respect.
But you know what? I mean, again, that is a symptom of imposter syndrome, because when someone said, are you the girl to take the notes? I was receiving the compliment on your behalf because I'm thinking, why, they obviously think that you're really young. You know, so I was seeing it in an entirely different way. And also someone saying, are you the one with 4 kids? No way. Right. So both those comments that you saw negative, I'm seeing it as positive.
I'm quite, I'm not a very optimistic person. I try to be, and I think I've tried to be more as I've got older. But years ago, I saw everything as like a personal attack and and that probably didn't help me in some of those situations.
Of course.
But I think those situations make that worse as well, because you kind of learn to sort of listen to those things and have to take those things. So you just take it on because you keep hearing it all the time. And I think Nicola made a really good point when she said about, you know, she would try and do things to make herself happier and to feel happier. But then obviously, you know, like you said, you don't leave it in work, you know, and wherever it is that people, you know, whether it's the other way around, that people are having, you know, a difficult home life and they've got a toxic home life and they then go to work, they don't really leave that behind. They know they've got to go back to that home. And, you know, all those things. And I think that, you know, what she was saying there is absolutely fantastic, because I think so many people will totally relate to that you can try and go and get help, or you can do things and put things into place, but you keep going back. And it's kind of like that analogy that we use about like dogs and fleas, or cats and fleas, that, you know, if a cat or a dog has got fleas, you can give them a flea treatment to get rid of the fleas. But then if they keep going back to wherever they picked up the fleas in the first place, they're going to keep picking them up again.
Absolutely. And this is something, again, that we hear in therapy, that so many people, they come, they have therapy, they feel great, they'll come to one of our workshops, they have this kind of detox for their mind, they feel fantastic, they feel invincible and enormously positive, and then they go back to their environment and get reinfested with the flea. So they come to us, we deflea them, as it were. That doesn't sound great, does it? But we kind of, you know, deflea and get rid of all. Metaphorically deflea everybody.
Yeah, I've never met anyone with fleas.
I haven't actually.
That you know of.
Yeah, that we know of. And then, but they go back into the environment and then get reinvested, don't they? And I think we've come across that many times, haven't we? I particularly remember there was a lady that had a lot of therapy, and she was the one that kept asking for help. Do you remember?
Yeah, I remember, and it was very interesting because she did come to several of our workshops, and each workshop she said, you know, she would say that I feel like I've made some progress, I feel a bit different. However, she didn't fully get over her issues. And then I remember that she came to one workshop, and it was like looking literally, physically like a different person. You could see there was less angst in her face. She was standing tall. I said, what has happened to you? And she said, Nick, I've lost 15 stone. And I'm like, I don't remember you being that big. She said, no, it was the person I was living with. Right. And that was it, right? Transformation.
Yeah.
So what was happening? She was making big progress in her life, and then she was going back to this home where that progress was being pulled back again. And when she got rid of this person, it all changed.
Yeah.
And that sounds, I believe that's part of your story, isn't it?
It is, yeah, because so I started counselling last October. I was in a really bad place, really just couldn't even get out of bed in the morning. And I was angry that I couldn't get out of bed, and I felt like I couldn't do anything right. Yeah. So if I wasn't very good at my job, because that's how I felt in the workplace, I felt like I couldn't even wash the pots, and I wouldn't do a good job of anything. Wow. So I started counselling, and we didn't really make any progress until I knew I was going to leave. Yeah. Because the thought of going back filled me with so much dread. I just thought, I'm going to have to go back to that place, and I'm still going to feel the way I feel now. So what's the point in talking about all these things, because it's not going to help. And the minute I made that decision to go, it was like a weight had been lifted. Yeah. And after Christmas, I remember somebody saying to me, you look like a different person. They said I looked like I was carrying all this sort of the weight of the world around, and I didn't really think about it. I didn't really care at the time. But it was only when I made that decision. Otherwise, I would have had to go back into that same environment again.
And get the fleas. You're never getting rid of them. You're being consistently infested, aren't you, really, in that scenario?
And it's amazing how it can change your face. I mean, it seems so bizarre saying that, but I've seen it so many times where people's face changes physically. And for someone to say to you, you look different. And so many people that have been to see us for therapy, their friends afterwards have said, have you had Botox? Like, seriously, it happens a lot. Yeah. But interestingly, so you're struggling all this time, and as soon as you make that decision, the weight lifts, doesn't it?
Immediately. Felt lighter, immediately.
And what was it? Was there like obviously you're saying that you were struggling with your mental health because of this toxic environment that you were in, but was there a pinnacle thought, or was there a specific, I mean, there might not be, so it's not like a trick question, but was there something, was there a point where you just went, I'm done? What was there a threshold point that you went,
over the edge?
I'm having it?
There was an incident, and I don't need to go into detail about it, but there's often something, isn't there, like the straw that broke the camel's back.
Course, yeah.
So I was going through the motions, and even people were sort of, even if they'd say hello to me, I had tears in my eyes, and I just felt so fragile all the time. And something happened, and it was just something that somebody said, and I literally just broke into a million pieces. And I just thought, I'm never going back. And at that time, I didn't even have a plan, but I just knew I couldn't go back. Yeah. And then slowly a plan started to form. And my husband and my kids were all saying the same thing, now is the time, like close that chapter, start a new one. And I hadn't been ready before. Yeah. And I was always quite scared. What will I do next? And, you know, that pressure to sort of find something that is the equivalent of what I'd had, it's difficult. But actually now I'm not scared of that. I'm not fearful of that. And for someone who was really resistant to change and scared of change, actually now I'm quite open to whatever the future holds, but that's taken me a long time to get to that point.
So what are you, because we very strongly believe in designing your future, and do you have a design? Do you know, what are you doing now? What's happening now in your world?
So I'm not going to sit there and say, oh, I get up at 5 a.m, I write in my journal and I meditate. But you know, I started going to the gym, things that I wasn't taking care of myself. I wasn't eating right. I wasn't sleeping right. I wasn't sleeping well because of those things. So I started doing that first, making sure that I was getting out of bed every morning, you know, that I was getting myself dressed, just doing the small things. And then just sat down one day and started thinking, right, okay, well, what is it that I've always wanted to do? I always wanted to work for myself. What's holding me back from that? What steps do I need to take to get there? And just slowly started carving this plan. And I remember when I was leaving and I had to hand my work laptop in after all this time. And I went to buy my own personal laptop, which I've never needed. And I was so proud of myself until I opened it and realised that I had no IT department to help me set it up anymore, and that I am the IT department. But that was a real proud moment. I remember just holding this laptop thinking, Brilliant. This is like my future here. Yeah. That symbolises my future. And that was probably, I love buying things, but that's probably the best thing that I think has brought me joy.
Yeah, that is so nice and so good. And I know that we all genuinely believe that, you know, we've all heard that statement, you know, that the sun rises after the darkest of days, but there will come a point in the future, Nicola, if you're not already doing it, where you're going to look back and you're going to go, it wasn't great, it wasn't the best 20 years. But I'm glad it happened because I learned so much, and I learned not what to do or not what I wanted. Yeah. And had it not been a toxic environment, I wouldn't have been pushed into starting off my own business and taking me on this new path.
No, I'd have stayed. I think I would have just stayed. But I think there's always a point, it's that breaking point, but you never know when it's going to come. Just took a long time for me. Yeah. And also now my children are older. So, because sometimes for some people, they don't have a choice.
No,
you know,
that's
you
true.
think you've got all these other financial, but you know, all those other things. Some people don't have a choice, so they stay. Yeah. Whereas I was lucky that I didn't need to. Yeah. So that's helped. Otherwise, I would probably still be in the same position. But last October was probably the darkest time in my entire life I've ever known.
So you're saying that a toxic environment led you to, like, literally being at the worst point in your life,
completely affecting every area of my life.
The GP said I was literally on the brink of a mental breakdown, and I didn't really see it. I knew I wasn't in a good place, but I don't think I realised how bad. Yeah.
And how did it affect your relationships at home?
Luckily, I've got a brilliant family, because I couldn't really find the words, but they knew. So my husband and my children knew. So they just really sort of took over. And so when I couldn't do things, I could obviously still do housework, but I didn't want to do anything. I was still in my pyjamas every day.
And did they know that was all work related?
Yeah. I was always quite, because I do bring work home with me, I always did do. So I would talk a lot about things that had gone on, and, you know, not even for advice, just to offload. Yeah. And I'd always say, I'm really sorry, but I need to get this off my chest, otherwise I'm going to carry it around. Or I'd say, I'm really sorry, but I don't even know how I'm going to be a mum today. Like, they might need to talk to me about something, but I've nothing left. I've nothing, you know, I just couldn't even.
It sound empty.
Yeah, I couldn't find any words.
It's mad, isn't it, how you kind of stay because you want to support your family, but then actually it affects the family. And, you know, like the kind of full circle of that. Yeah. That actually then the reason why you were staying in the first place is now that's actually now being negatively affected by the situation.
So my husband just took over because I'm the leader. I'm the one who organises everything. I run, I do but he sort of just stepped into that space along with my other children. And I think if he hadn't, I'm not sure what I'd have done. And there was no pressure. I think that's the other thing. Some people put pressure on you. They go, oh, you'll be fine. Or, or why are you not getting dressed today? Why? It's not that easy when you sat there in your pajamas at 3:00.
Yeah, no,
and you don't want to get dressed, and you haven't ate your lunch because you don't feel like eating anything, but you need to, and it's just like a cycle, isn't it?
We're talking about toxic environments, like realistically, and this is something that we've not discussed in advance, but are we literally saying, is it toxic environment or is it toxic people? Let's discuss.
Yeah, no, I'd say it's people. People create the vibe in the environment, shall we say?
I would say
that. I can give you some science on that, science corner. But yeah, so I mean, there's a thing called emotional contagion, which, I mean, it's funny because you said before, I can't remember the exact words you used, but you said something like about a being that you get sort of
polluted by toxicity, and negativity is contagious.
Contagious was the word you used, and technically it actually is, because emotional contagion is basically the fact that we mirror the emotions of those around us. So even from birth, if you smile at a baby near enough from birth, they will smile back, and it is contagious. And part of that could be because we recently found, like fairly recently in terms of science research, that we have something called mirror neurons in the brain, and basically these are neurons that are activated both when we do something and also when we see someone else do it. So the same neurons activated if it's us doing it or someone that we're looking at. And we still fully don't understand why we have them. We assume it's for like empathy and understanding, maybe, so that we can understand, if someone else is doing that, how do I feel when I do that? So they must be feeling that same way. But in order for that to be the case, what you've got to think about is if we're around people that are feeling really negative, really down, and communicating those things, we're inevitably going to mirror and match those emotions. We're going to feel the same ways to try and in part understand why they feel that way, because that's human nature. But we mirror their emotions and match those. And do you not think that
part of that is also they're sort of giving us a connection with people? Because, it's because we like to be liked and we want to have friends, then sometimes we will behave perhaps not in a way that we would normally behave, because we're looking to get some sort of a connection with people.
True.
And therefore we will drop our standards, or we will if someone's whinging about the government or whinging about the price of potatoes or whatever it might be, instead of sort of going, well, yeah, but luckily, whatever, we might join in on that. Yeah, well, did you see how much the bread was? Do you know what I mean? So we do sometimes, but not necessarily because we want to be negative.
No, because and we know ourselves, we've got friends that make us feel good and friends that don't necessarily make us feel good. And because we do join into those conversations, and if you're with a friend who's always complaining, then you can't help but add to that. They'll say, oh, you won't believe what's happened to me today. And then you listen to all that and you go, well, let me tell you this about me. And you'll tell them, you tell them things that went wrong with you. Whereas,
I think my favourite is when people start talking about the scars and the operations. Yeah, but well, look at this one.
That's like the Jaws scene, isn't it? Yeah, this shark got me here,
but that's very true, we do.
But it is, and look, no one's immune for good or bad things happening to them, right? But we want to always focus on the good things and be grateful for the good things, and put less emphasis on the bad things. But if you're around someone who's always talking about their bad things, your way to have a commonality with them is to talk about your bad things, which invariably brings you down.
But also, not only as well do we have that emotional contagion, and we do pick up that, and we do tend to mirror and join in and all those things, but it also comes down to, red car theory that we speak about. This idea that if someone said to you, how many red cars did you pass on your way into work today? You would say probably that you don't remember, you have no idea, because you weren't looking for them. Yeah. Whereas if I said to you, okay, on your way to work today, I will pay you, £20 if you can tell me exactly how many red cars you saw, you would be 100% sure on how many red cars. Absolutely. You'd be totally zoned into it and looking for them.
Of course.
And this is the same with what you're saying, because if you're around people that are pointing out negatives and are pointing out, have you noticed this? Have you noticed that? They will start to open your eyes to things that you've not even been looking for. So suddenly you're looking out for these negativities, and that's going to affect your mental health.
But also, you will make other things fit as well. So, you might go, well, I saw 20 red cars, but perhaps only 15 were red. There might have been 2 that were burgundy. There might be some that was like on going to a shade of brown, but you call them red. You will make things fit to find
so
more
true
of them.
also.
Yeah.
And then we've also got that kind of survival instinct as well. So particularly, and I don't know if this was the case with you, Nicola, at work, but I know that I remember sort of from school, for example, that because I was bullied at school, and there was a group. Now, if you spread that group apart, most of them were really nice, and there tended to be one ringleader. And what would actually happen is that you had one ringleader and the rest of them would join forces, not because they necessarily agreed, but because they themselves were fearful of being the target. And yet me as a kid, I'm thinking, oh my God, everybody hates me. When realistically, now I can look back on it as an adult and go, no, actually what happened is there was one ringleader who bullied me and I didn't challenge it, so I was an easy target. And the rest of them joined forces because they just didn't want to be the target of the bully themselves. So that's kind of also that way that, you're saying about we kind of adapt our behaviour when we're around toxic people.
I've seen that many times, because I think one person can then breed that bad behaviour, and it goes then throughout the organisation.
Makes it acceptable.
And it absolutely becomes acceptable. So people then think that the way that they're treated must be okay. Because
You see more of it.
Exactly, and everybody's treated that way. And I used to desperately want to please people, and and I couldn't understand if people didn't like me. I was like, why? Why don't you like me? What am I doing? Yeah. Actually, now I don't really care what people think about me. Good. But that takes time to get to that point. But I saw people crumble and be reduced to tears. I've seen a lot over a long career in that one place. But it's sad. It makes me really sad that those things are allowed to happen.
Yeah, it is. It's so unnecessary. I said I don't understand. I totally understand why these things happen. People like to have a power trip because they perhaps don't feel good enough. They themselves might have imposter syndrome. And so to try and make themselves look better, they will speak down to people to give them an air of authority, I guess. But an analogy that we like to use is that people are like plants. So, and where we're planted has a bearing on how we feel. So we could have, 2 exact flowers, one in a plant pot that is well watered, the soil's nourished, it's put in a nice bright place away from a draft. And then you've got the other flower that's in a flower pot that doesn't get watered very often. It's in a drafty position, it's dark, there might be rocks and weeds. Both the same type of plant, but the one that's with the weeds and the rocks is going to struggle to bloom realistically. And that's us as human beings, depending on where we plant ourselves. I mean, when you're a kid, where you planted, and you just
got no choice.
You give it your best shot with the environment you're given. But then when we become an adult, we can then lift ourselves out of that plant pot and plant ourselves somewhere else. But unfortunately, quite often with work, that does suppress growth because of...
And you can't choose who you work with, can you? That's the thing. So I could employ people and I had choice over that. But outside of that, you can't. So you can choose. I could choose if I spend time with outside of work and I find people who make me happy. And those who don't, I won't spend time with. In work, that's almost impossible. And maybe I look back now and I think, is it a mix of different styles? Is it that maybe you're never going to get on with certain people? Don't take it so personally. I'm trying to learn lessons from it so that, I don't want to, it's not that it was all bad. It was amazing at times. It's just that there are sometimes people that come along who you don't perhaps gel with, but you're never going to gel with.
Did you ever find that some of the people that you employed that you thought were amazing, which is why you employed them, then changed and became like the others?
Oh my word, yes. And the biggest lesson I ever learned from that was not trusting my gut instinct. The times when I didn't trust my gut instinct because I thought that on paper, or I thought, that it would play out a certain way because on paper they looked amazing. And then actually the person that I'd employed was like the very thing that I would have, displayed every behaviour that I would want to stay away from. Mm-hmm. And that bred within the team that I'd created. I absolutely had that scenario once. And that person left in the end because I think they just knew that they weren't a good fit for that team.
I mean, sometimes in work it can feed into the like the psychology of a mob mentality where people will say and do things that aren't true to their values or beliefs, but they just do them because of the environment that they're in.
Yeah.
So kind of in our Handbook to Happiness, and we sort of what we're saying here is that, you know, whether that's your home environment, whether that's your work environment, whether it's school, school. I mean, you had your fair share of toxicity at school, didn't you?
Absolutely, and even at university, really. You know, in specific places. I think that when you get groups of people together, it can often happen, like Nicola was saying. And also, obviously, I know a lot of people, you know, experience that at home as well, and with family dynamics as well.
But knowing that, so we've all experienced sort of toxic environments, and I mean, we had a toxic environment ourselves, you know. So you know, we're all, like I said, no one's immune. It can affect any of us. And I know that about 20 years ago, we had a health club, and in that health club, we employed people, and it was brilliant, and it was a great environment. And then it just took one person, one member of the team that came in, and it just suddenly washed.
The whole dynamic changed. And the reason why it changed is because that one person that came in started having a relationship with someone else who was there, but was in a relationship with someone else, and the whole dynamics of everything totally changed.
And I, you know, I'm a fixer, and I always want to do the best I can. But I remember in that scenario, I had to do one of the hardest things I have ever had to do. I really like to be liked, and I believe in being fair, but I didn't like confrontation, and I was gonna say I still don't. I avoid confrontation, but I'm not fearful of confrontation.
Right? No one likes confrontation, but obviously.
But this is like 20 years ago, and I had to go in that environment, and I had to really step outside of my comfort zone, and I had a choice. I either let the environment continue to fester as it was, or I had to do something very drastic, and that drastic action, which I decided to take, was just to let everybody go. I was like, okay, so I am going to have to run this place, work in this place until we can restaff it. But it was better that to sort of purify. And in essence, what I was doing, I was weeding my garden. That's basically what I was doing. And it was difficult. I remember it wasn't not in my nature.
But like Nicola said, immediately when you'd done that and it was over, felt the relief.
Well, I had certainty then, because the other thing is that feels really bad is that uncertainty.
But
which is what you were saying.
Yeah, no, but you got certainty and massive uncertainty at the same time, because, you know, I mean, literally everyone was involved in that situation and everyone went. So now suddenly you've got to fully staff the whole thing. So the certainty is you don't have the toxicity anymore, but the uncertainty is you've got to find a lot of new people and you know, obviously, and build a team that like we used to have.
And that's the same with Nicola. So she obviously has the certainty of being out of that environment, but the uncertainty of, well, then what after that, you know? And I think that's what stops a lot of people leaving those environments. Again, relationships is a really common one.
Oh, yes.
If people are in a toxic relationship,
and again,
a toxic at home, then, you know, again, same thing. Often they feel, I don't want to be in this situation. I know it's making me feel awful, but I don't know what the alternative is.
But for me, Liv, so before I met your dad, as you know, I was in a relationship that was very toxic and very sort of mentally and physically abusive. But because I had such low self-esteem, because I'd been so beaten down, I was made to believe that I was lucky to even have him. But that's how he made me feel. Because if I don't want you, nobody else is going to want you.
Is that not as well the uncertainty of instill uncertainty, but uncertainty of what's the alternative? Because you just think, well, you've been made to feel that you're not good enough. So the uncertainty is I'm probably never going to be in a relationship again if this is all I'm going to get.
Totally.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So even though it's not great, it's in your head, you're thinking, well, if I leave, I've got that uncertainty of what if no one ever...
And there's that old statement, there's absolutely no fact behind it, which I think, you know, in my view, that because, as you know, we talk about superstitions a lot, and I think that this was started off many hundreds of years ago by some abuser who said, better the devil you know. And it's carried on. And now people go, well, better the devil you know.
Yeah, but interestingly, so I was in this toxic environment and believing that I deserved that pollution and toxicity and deserved to be treated that way. And then I met you, I met your dad, and suddenly then...
winning the lottery.
Oh,
like the jackpot. Honestly,
day. Like,
jackpot.
but then what did I do? I got this, like, you know, he did have a perm when I met him, which
Was that what drew you in?
Fashionable. You know.
I still can't forget that. You know,
Yeah.
there he is with his fashionable perm, and he had a very big briefcase, so I thought he was proper grown up. 'cause he had a big
Serious.
briefcase. And
Listen,
then
you fell for it. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
You're laughing
Just
about
Chris
it.
laughing about it.
You're laughing
Yeah.
at yourself.
It obviously worked.
You're
didn't
going,
it?
you know, I fancied this guy with a perm and a massive briefcase. That's what you're saying, right?
That's a dating tip for people, that.
Yeah, in
Perm in a
fact.
briefcase.
Yeah, in fact, you put yourself down.
Yeah.
Because
well, go
you
on.
chose me, right? Yeah.
But where I was going with that was then I sabotaged our relationship because tried to because I believed that I didn't deserve Nick. So because I'd made to be feel so inferior and so unworthy of love and attention, that I kind of was trying to protect myself, thinking, well, this isn't going to last. My heart's going to be broken. That's definitely going to be the outcome. So I might as well push all his buttons so that he bails on me sooner rather than later, even though I didn't want
That
that.
just reminded me, I don't know, this is not, like, honestly, you were talking about something really serious, and I just had the thought of you when you said pushing all his buttons. Have you seen, you know that scene in Elf where Will Ferrell's in the lift and he just, like, slides down all the buttons?
I do.
That's all that came into
Favourite
my
film.
head.
Favourite film.
Question
Always
though.
did that as a kid.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I was such not a rule breaker. I would have never
Question
done
though,
that.
going back to what you're saying, because that was really interesting. So for people listening that have, because I think what you've just said there, so many people will resonate with.
Yeah.
That they're in a situation where they might sabotage relationships, friendships, whatever it might be, because they also feel like they're not worthy.
Yeah.
How did that change for you then? How did you, if someone's listening that was in that same situation, what was it for you that changed, right? Like, how did you stop that sabotaging?
Well, so first of all, it didn't happen overnight. You know, I wish I could say that one morning I woke
magic
up, I had
answer.
this thought, and it all changed. That isn't how it goes. I do think that life experience helps, but the fact that no matter that Nick supported me all the way through, and Nick would point out my qualities, and there came a point where he backed me into a corner, and I was like, yeah, all right, I can't argue with what you've just said there. But it was just the fact that I had a good person. It goes back to exactly what this whole episode started off with, that I was in a toxic environment, and because I was in a toxic environment, I believed that I wasn't good enough. And then my environment changed drastically, and I went into a very positive and very nourished environment with Nick, and therefore it was in that environment that I was allowed to grow, and because the weeds weren't there, I could actually see myself for who I really was for the first time. That's the answer. It is definitely that. It was
and I
the
suppose when
environment.
you are in that supportive environment, you can probably then feel that you can have that conversation with him and say, look, I know that I've got insecurities or whatever it might be from the past, so I need from you to support me in this way, to
And
like,
again, that's
tell
a
me what
very
you like about me, you know, those sorts of things. To,
very good point. Yeah.
you know, not that you should rely on someone, but that they can help you, you know, when you are in the right supportive environment. They will do, you know, even like Nick was saying, you know, she felt so bad because of work, and her husband supported her and encouraged her and helped her to feel strong enough really to get out of the situation.
He was like my cheer. They were like cheerleaders. You need like your own fans, don't you? So you need people to tell you that
Cheerleaders to push you on.
and that's exactly how I referred to them. I was like, you literally are like my biggest cheerleader. When I'm feeling down, you say something to me that makes me think, actually, no, that's not true. And also, those people aren't responsible for your feel. I'm responsible for how I feel, and I shouldn't have been letting people make me feel a certain way. But it's just that positivity in your ear all the time. I think I personally, I definitely needed that.
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
But I'd like to myth bust something here
Oh,
because, well, I'm going back to the statement, better the devil you know, because we say things and they have a material impact on how we behave, and we say them without actually thinking about them enough. So, number one in that statement, right, you don't have to live with the devil. Think about it. Why would you want to live with the devil
No, we
anyway?
don't.
You know, who would want that, right? So don't live with the devil. Find someone who... I was going to say something, and I better not. It could be taken in the wrong way.
Would it be rude? Something
What?
rude? Would it sound
I was going to
rude?
have to live with someone with horns, but I was just like... but you don't need to live with the devil. And just think that, look at what you actually deserve. And if you think you deserve less than what you are, that's only because someone one of those devils has made you believe that.
Yeah, because I think, I say it often, and I'm going to say it again, that how we see ourselves is based upon how other people have made us feel. And if we have been around bad people, then they will make us feel bad. And if we've been around good people, then we will feel good. And I don't think it's any more complicated than that. So
it is as simple as that. But there's one thing, a caveat I'd like to add to that, because I believe there's no bad people in the world.
Well, no, there isn't really.
Those bad people behave bad and they were perceived bad because of their bad circumstances.
Yeah,
not because they
interestingly, both myself and you as well, Nicola, and live at you at school, not so much you because you're Mr. Positive and you don't accept toxicity in your life. He's like a bug spray. So he walks around and he just sprays everywhere. And he walks around in this.
Man. Have you seen the Gaviscon advert?
I haven't.
No.
So.
You know the Gaviscon advert where he takes the Gaviscon and the firefighter comes down with the hose.
Yes. That's your dad.
hosing.
Yeah, Nick just sort of walks around with permanent bug spray and he's just like got this beautiful little glowing light of positivity
because the Gaviscon
around
man's
him.
fighting the fire of the acid.
Yeah,
I'll do that.
He's like fighting the fire.
I can do that.
But yeah, I don't think you've kind of really experienced it as. Obviously, you've been in toxic environments, but you just simply don't tolerate them. Whereas I think because we've all been in toxic environments, and maybe we've had our self-esteem knocked, and that's why we've accepted it. I think we probably could all say that. I think that the thing that, and the real take home for me, and I was actually going to sort of start asking everybody about their tips for their handbook to happiness. But the irony is that we've all had those people around us that are toxic. We've walked away believing perhaps at some point it was our fault. But what we don't appreciate is that person carries on being toxic because actually it was never really about us, was it? Yeah. It was about, if you've got this, it's like the scorpion and the frog story. I'm sure most people have heard of that, where the frog wants to go across the river and other way around.
No.
Start again, rewind.
Let me tell the story.
And we'll start again.
Yeah.
Go on, you tell the story.
Yeah.
I've done a typical Eva there. I'm such a classic Eva.
Do you know
Yes,
what?
it's
On this
classic.
podcast, you've not really done that. Like
No,
making the little slip-ups that you make all the time that are really funny.
I
All
am
the
known
time.
for my little slip-ups,
They're
but
so
anyway.
funny. Honestly.
I can't think of one.
For
But
You
those,
get yourself
people,
mixed
for those
up.
people that don't know, the scorpion wants to cross the river and he looks for ways to get across and he sees the frog. And he goes over and says, Mr. Frog, will you help me across the river?
he's a polite scorpion.
And the frog says,
Mr. Frog.
No, scorpion, you will kill me. You will sting me and you will kill me. And the scorpion says, but I won't do that because if I did that, we'd both die. No one's going to do that. And he convinces the frog to take him across the river. So the scorpion gets on the frog's back. They're going across the river. They get halfway across and the scorpion stings the frog. And the frog's dying. And he says, why have you done that? We're both going to die now. And he said, because I'm a scorpion and that's what I do.
And that is basically why not anything that anyone's done. If anybody has been unkind to you, pulled you down, been mean to you, just done anything that you felt uncomfortable or has felt so bad, it's not because of you, it's because of who they are.
And I think that's important because, like Nicola was saying, a lot of people that are in those environments do think it's because of them because you're made to feel that way.
Correct.
But just because that's the way you're made to feel doesn't make it true because it isn't because of you.
Can I say that, when the frog said, why did you do that?
Yes.
Scorpion, why? I don't think he'd have been that calm. I actually think...
No, he was already sinking, weren't he?
Yeah,
He was like-
I'm thinking about you, bloody
Yeah,
bed,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. I think there would have been some.
Well,
I
well-
think
Self-righteous.
I would think
I
there would
knew
have-
you were going to do
yeah,
that.
and I think there would have been some expletives in there as
and
well.
I do think the scorpion would have been like, I didn't really want to do it, but I couldn't help it.
Yeah.
Also,
And
I've got
that's
another
true,
thought.
though.
Sorry, just do frogs and scorpions speak the same language?
Look, it's a story. Let's
Have
just go
you
with
ever
it.
considered that? Like, because
Yeah.
animals talk to each other. Do they speak?
I think
Are they like
they-
bilingual? Like, do they speak like?
I think so. I think they understand each other.
Do you?
I actually think that it's a metaphorical story more than actually happened.
I feel like we need more details on
I don't
this.
think it was accurately documented. I don't, unless obviously the person to speak to and must get him on the podcast is David Attenborough.
Yeah.
Did that happen?
But
Just
then
speak to
you've got to
David
consider whoever wrote it also had to speak frog and scorpion to
Yes.
understand the
Yeah, wow.
conversation in the first place.
Maybe it was
Yeah.
written by an eel.
Multilingual. usual.
Anyway, we're going off track here.
Yes.
It's getting late in the afternoon, isn't it? So going back to, we're creating this handbook to happiness, and we're exploring loads of different things that affect all of us. Even those things where quite often we'll be sat there thinking, oh my God, it's just me. We know it's not just you. But we're creating this metaphorical handbook to happiness. And obviously today we've been talking about toxicity, toxic environments, feeling trapped by them, pressured by people within our home space, workspace, school space, whatever it might be. So if you could add a nugget or nuggets of wisdom into our handbook to happiness, is there something that you could share?
I've stolen this. I don't know where I've stolen it from, but I just read it somewhere.
We appreciate your honesty and your theft.
Yeah, I didn't come up with this. So let me make sure I get this right. For me, this is what I've learned on my journey the last 6 months. Other people are not responsible for your happiness. I used to look to other people thinking I wasn't happy and that they need to do something for that to change, but it's not. No. It's only me. I can only create my happiness. And that's not other people's responsibility.
I think that is an exceptional bit of advice.
And that ties in what do I always say, Eva? Happiness is an inside job.
Do I get a gold star for that?
You do.
You do. You're right there on it. I love that.
Yeah, honestly, you'll get a sticker. We'll get your little sticker
love
with
that.
a good girl sticker. Liv, have you got anything to add to our metaphorical?
Yeah, I think that was great, actually, Nick. But yeah, I would also add, I think that if you are in a toxic environment, which obviously, your aim should always be to get out of that toxic environment, but sometimes it's not possible at the current time. And I think that if you are in that, just to realise not to blame yourself, because I think that's a really common theme that, has been coming up today when we've been talking, that you do often blame yourself for that environment. And, as we've been saying here, and, you made a perfect point that as soon as you leave that environment remains toxic. Nicola's left that job, but it doesn't mean that environment's now suddenly going to be great. It's still going to be toxic. She's just better for not being in it. And I think that's the thing that I would really want to stress to people listening, that, if they are in that toxic environment, do not blame yourself. Do not think it's your fault. It's just the way it is. And, people are the way they are, and sometimes they create toxic environments because of the things they've been through, because of their past experiences, and it's not personal, that's just the way that they are, but we shouldn't take ourselves to blame for that, because it's nothing to do with us. And also another thing just to add in there is, if a scorpion asks you to help him cross the river, say no.
That's an excellent piece of advice, Liv.
Thought you'd like that.
I think you've all given.
I've not finished yet.
Oh, so that's because I was trying to ignore you.
So my hearing Nick's story today, that she knew long before she did leave that she wanted to, but she couldn't leave because of the pressures. So I've got two things on pressures. As you know, you can't be anxious and laugh. So I'd like to share with you that I went for a job once. And one of the questions that the interviewer asked me, could I perform under pressure? And I said, I don't know about that one, but I'll give Bohemian Rhapsody a go.
I knew he was going to say that.
No, well, thanks for laughing.
This is why it's nice having guests, because they'll laugh at your jokes.
Yeah, because they're too polite. Guests are always polite.
So what we've got to consider is the pressure worth the pain? Is something that I'd like to question and consider. And if it's not, and you can leave, then leave, because you shouldn't be feeling stressed, anxious. You shouldn't certainly be at a point where you just dread going in. However, if you've got financial pressures and there are pressures that you have to stay there, then think about a strategy. Think about an exit plan. And even if you go, right, okay, this isn't a great place to be, but I've got an 18-month plan. This is what I'm going to do. This will help me get out of that situation, because it took you 18 months, didn't it, to do that? Yeah. Then at least you've got something to look forward to, because when you've got something to look forward to, and when you've got that light at the end of the tunnel, it just makes things easier.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that, actually, because that is so true, that I know when I was in sixth form, I felt the same way. and I couldn't get out of that situation. And I think it's probably, you know, maybe if there's younger people listening might feel the same. If it's a school thing, you can't obviously get out of that situation. But I knew for me, that's kind of what got me through, that I only had, you know, 2 years of sixth form. So when I was feeling like the environment wasn't helpful for my mental health, I knew, look, I've just got to stick this out for the next 18 months or 12 months, however long it was at that point. And that gave me, because sometimes you can't get out, but knowing that eventually you can, that gave me that kind of reassurance that it will be fine because I can get there and I will get out of this situation.
And by focusing on that light at the end of the tunnel, you can also be thinking, I'm going to have the last laugh. And you're thinking about that.
And you can start to create and think about how things will be after it. Because like Nicola said, she felt completely lost when she felt she couldn't get out. And once she had that, once she said she was going to go, even though she was still in the job for a bit, she knew then she was leaving. So even just knowing that, knowing you can get out of that toxic environment can really help.
So my additions to the Handbook to Happiness are that there is only one person that's going to be with you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and all your life. And that is you. And if you feel that any environment or person is suppressing your growth and blocking out your sunlight, then it is perfectly acceptable for you to uproot yourself and move somewhere else. I'd also like you to appreciate that you have definitely faced many toxic people, many toxic environments, many difficult situations in your life. And ultimately, you've never let yourself down because you've got yourself to today, and you will get through an abundance more ups and downs in life, and you're perfectly capable. So please don't lose sight of your strength. And I think Nicola today has been a great example of, you know, you can be a mum and a wife and have a home and have financial responsibility and be in a job for over 20 years with the same people doing the same thing. And you can one day go, do you know what? I deserve better. And you can walk away. And when you do so, you absolutely will survive. And whether, my final little bit is that whether we're talking about family or friends or work colleagues, you are perfectly entitled to weed your garden and move the weeds away, again, like I say, so that you can be the best possible person you can be. So thank you to Nicola for joining us.
Thank you for joining us today.
We really appreciate it. I think what you've said there will resonate with so many people, and we wish you lots of success with your new business and new ventures. This time working double hard, and it's for you this time.
Sure is.
And it will be appreciated by you and your family. And we'd also like to congratulate you on all the new jobs you've got, like IT and chief brewer.
New skills.
That you've created. But we'd also just like to say a very huge thank you to everyone that's listening and watching our Handbook to Happiness today. And we hope that we've added a little bit of sunlight and nourishment to your soil today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us. Wherever you're listening to this podcast today, do be sure to like, follow, subscribe, and we'd be incredibly grateful of a 5-star review.
Oh, and don't forget to recommend our podcast to your family and friends.
And if you'd like to have a look at some more free resources, take a look at our website, nickandeva.com.
If you want to drop us a question, we'd love to hear from you. Send it to admin@speakman.tv.
And you can follow us. We're at The Speakmans on all social media platforms. On YouTube, we're Handbook to Happiness Pod. If you are struggling, do be sure to speak to your general practitioner. And all that's left to say is that we appreciate you spending time with us today.